So, another video talking about the Buddha's teaching on Paticca Samuppada. We'll be talking about link number 8, craving. Tanha in the Pali means thirst, and generally it can be taken as any form of passionate desire for life to be different than it is. When talking about craving, I realised that it's true of all these videos and any discussion of Paticca Samuppada that you cannot actually only consider one link, and in actual fact each description of Paticca Samuppada, of any element in Paticca Samuppada, must feature the whole of Paticca Samuppada. So it may very well be in these videos that there is a lot of repetition and I keep going over the same fundamental themes, but that's fine. I mean, that's my job. I spent the last 18 years doing that. I'm not going to stop now. But that did make me then think about the nature of Paticca Samuppada itself, and how there are an infinite number of iterations of this process, this basic equation. And I likened it to the fractal patterns, the Mandelbrot set being an example of that, where you have these mathematical equations which are out of which are created these endless patterns. No matter how you magnify and go into the pattern, no matter how far you come out of the pattern, you keep getting these amazing patterns emerging, and it appears as though they're unique each time, but actually at whatever level of magnification, they're actually based on the same fundamental equation. And Paticca Samuppada is exactly like that. So it can be seen on the macroscopic level and the microscopic level, and all levels in between. So, and that's really quite helpful with what I wanted to talk about and how I wanted to approach describing craving in the context of how suffering arises, because it's very relevant. And so it seemed to me again pertinent to go back to what the fundamental issue that gives rise to Paticca Samuppada is, and it's a basic fundamental misinterpretation of reality. So all enlightened beings are enlightened because they have realised life's essential fundamental emptiness. That it's not a state of concentration, as some people seem to misperceive it. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, actually there is no separation anywhere amongst any things. It's such a difficult idea to get your head around, because it's so obvious that there are things that why are we even having this conversation? But nonetheless, enlightenment is the realization of non-separateness, non-duality, if you prefer, that there is no separation between things. There are no things. Sabbe Dhamma Anatta. Most usually translated as all phenomena are non-self, but a looser translation could be all things are not things. So it's not simply the discovery that there's no self, as in me, it is the discovery that there are no things. Nothing stands alone. So go back to the illustration that I've used previously of the tree. This is a mundane description, but it illustrates the point. The tree is dependent on the rain, the light, sunlight, and the nutriment being drawn up from the ground for its existence. So where do you draw the line and say that is a tree and that is something different from sunlight or from rain or from nutrients. And of course, what we do is we make an arbitrary conceptual delineation of what we consider to be the tree, but in order to create the tree in that moment, we have to disregard and ignore all the necessary conditions that must be there for that tree to be there. So in reality, you cannot actually make those divisions. So enlightenment is that which is beyond division. It is therefore also beyond that which is describable. So it can't be described because concepts by their very nature divide. They have to. And that is a denial of the truth of conditionality. So see how complicated it is to try to put it into words, but this is pertinent when it comes to craving. So yeah, another aspect of the fact that there are so many iterations of Paticca Samuppada is that there is no first beginning. There is no discoverable beginning to the process. So we're always beginning our discussions about it from the point at which the veil of ignorance has already come up and is obscuring people's vision of reality. So there is already a fundamental misinterpretation going on, and so there is an a priori belief in the existence of a self which is separate from all conditions. So that is in total contradiction of reality, because so already there is a warp, a fundamental warp at the base of every moment of consciousness, which is therefore interpreting the whole of experience. Now, once you have that a priori, I wish I could get my words straight, a priori assumption of selfhood, you view reality, the reality of non-separateness, as the most incredibly threatening void. So there is identification with this idea of self, belief in this idea of self. If anyone untrained, as it were, merely looks at the truth of emptiness, of non-separateness, there is immediately a deep existential fear arises. Oh, shouldn't be like that. That's craving for life to be different than it is. See, because in the unenlightened mind, there is one more thing in existence, according to the unenlightened mind, than reality can handle. Just one too many things. The ego, or the belief in the self. That's one too many things for the for reality to handle. So, with the a priori belief in the self, there is no desire at all to acknowledge reality. So this is really interesting. You can put it another way and say that we actively ignore reality because we're scared of it. Because through simply observing the truth as it really is, the discovery is there isn't a separate entity from conditions. And so therefore, that void, apparent void, that emptiness, is deeply threatening and is seen as some kind of annihilation. So the mind, infested with self-belief in self-view, turns away from reality. And what it does is then what we talked about in the previous episode, it clings to the five aggregates. It clings to materiality, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness as being me, mine, myself. So now you have established a fundamental division, a belief in one's own separateness, something that needs constant protecting, psychological protection, that needs security, which needs solidity. However, as we, if I recall rightly, we also discussed in the last episode, these aggregates are utterly fleeting. They arise due to conditions and pass away. And they offer no firm basis, no solid ground, no way of solidly identifying the self. And so there is constant activity to try to actualize self, to create a situation where there will be safety and security and fulfillment for the self. But because the aggregates are transient, that process is never ending. So we experience the results of those actions that we perform in trying to solidify everything, and those results are necessarily transient and unsatisfactory. So what emerges with the constant iteration of this process is a deep sense of dissatisfaction, a sense of division, a sense of separation. And so the process then begins to repeat itself. So we're faced with a world which does not conform to our hopes and our expectations, that seems to place us in a state of perpetual insecurity. And so with each new iteration of Paticca Samuppada, we are faced with reality, we misinterpret it, and then we passionately desire for it to be different than it is. And so we go through these constant iterations, but we're always, forever and always, faced with reality. Reality is always staring us in the face. Life doesn't lie to us, ever. We lie to ourselves. And so this process of craving, this act of craving, is denial of reality. So ignorance and craving are so tightly bound up together. You could almost say that what follows on from craving is clinging, and you could say that in a way the clinging is our attempt to justify the continued avoidance of reality. I mean, it's very understandable. If you're faced with what appears to be an unimaginable void, a kind of annihilation, why you wouldn't just fling yourself in? This is why, without wishing to sound disrespectful, this is why the idea that there's nothing you need to do in order to realise enlightenment is such twaddle. Excuse my language. But there are deep emotional attachments. There are such deep emotional investment in life, in the world as it is ignorantly clung to. No one's just going to throw themselves into this apparent threatening void without some serious mental development having gone on first. Serious levels of faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration and investigation, what we call in Buddhism 5 spiritual faculties. They have to be developed in order to undercut, to let go of, to remove, to renounce all the clinging attachment to the world. Anyway, I'm slightly getting away from craving here, but I hope you kind of follow at least a little bit what I'm endeavouring to put across. So the craving then is always in response to resultant experience. So resultant experience is passive in the sense that we experience life through the senses, 5 physical senses and mind. We're bombarded with all these various sensory experiences, and in each case we are responding. with this warped consciousness, with this warped misunderstanding at the base of each conscious moment. So then you get a confirmation bias going on, because each time you're responding to the unsatisfactoriness of life, you want life to be a certain way. It's like we've got a map in our minds of the way we think life should be. We're confronted with the way the life is, and when the two don't match up, we crave for it to be different. The results of that craving, when we act, produce results which are unsatisfactory, which reinforce the belief that the world is wrong, and we need to do something to make it right. That's where egotism comes from, all the rest of the bag of ills of human life. So it's a never-ending process where you're having your bias confirmed back to you again and again and again. Again, another reason why you just can't step into enlightenment. There's got to be a lot of work has to go into this. So, all right. So the Buddha talks about there being 3 kinds of craving. So there's craving for objects of sense. So it's 5 physical senses to derive pleasure as a way of overcoming the unsatisfactoriness with which we're faced. And also mental objects too can be deeply pleasurable or enjoyable or desirable. So there's the chasing of sensory pleasures, sensory phenomena. So that's one form of craving. Another form is craving for becoming, which means that we see the world as being wrong, and we go, right, okay, I am going to act to put it right. So that's how we get craving for becoming. So, and in many respects, in terms of just worldly existence, it makes sense to have a career and think about your career, and to provide for a wife or a husband, and create a family, and go through all these processes, and to have a holiday every year. But of course, all these things are, in the last analysis, transient. So all becoming, the idea that you are going to, the problem is the idea of permanence, the idea that when I've got this, when I've got that, when I've got the other, then I'll be happy, then everything will be sorted, then fine. But it doesn't work. Why? Because all the results are experiences which are made up of incredibly transient, fleeting sensory phenomena. So it's not going to give you the fulfillment that you want. And the other form of craving is craving for non-becoming. So essentially trying to stop things from changing or keeping things the same. So same problem. Well, the problem is embedded in the very activity, isn't it? It's like trying to keep things the same. You can appear for a while to do that, but again, transience is fundamental. It's going to change, whatever it is. You can't keep things the same. I guess you could also include in that hearkening back to previous times, and why can't it be like it was? Is that becoming or non-becoming? So like make America great again, or Brexit, taking back our country, or whatever it might be. So is that becoming or non-becoming? Doesn't matter, it's still craving, isn't it? Craving for life to be different than it is. So all of that is dependent upon misinterpreting the nature of conscious experience. All of it. We must make a clear distinction between craving and preferences, and craving and desire to do. Craving is the passionate desire for life to be different than it is. I don't have to crave in order to brush my teeth. Just as a desire to do is enough. And my preference is for clean teeth and fresh smelling breath. Craving would be being utterly dissatisfied with the with the shape of my teeth, and believing that somehow something is wrong. Where if there's identification with the body as self, then if I believe my teeth are wrong, then I am wrong. So I'm not complete, I'm dissatisfied, and so then you get the whole process unfolding. So yeah. So to sum all that up, you thinking about it now, you could say that all craving is the desire to do away with suffering. Yeah. All craving is the attempt to get rid of suffering. So it's understandable. It's not, no one's being told off here. No one's being blamed. It's just being pointed out. So all our various attempts through craving, to find fulfillment, to find security, it's totally understandable. It's being done in the wrong way. It's going the wrong way. What you have to do is bring an end to the cycle of Paticca Samuppada. So you have to break down craving for life to be different than it is, which means accepting the first noble truth, which is life is suffering, and the second noble truth, that craving perpetuates it, and the third noble truth, there is an end to it, and the fourth noble truth, that the way you bring it to an end is by eliminating craving. And there's a path that you can follow in order to accomplish that. So it's eliminating the craving so that the becoming ceases. So there's a stopping of avoiding that threatening void. So when Paticca Samuppada stops, it is then possible for, well, how to put this? In the stopping of the becoming, the inherent transcendent wisdom of the true nature of reality is understood to be ever present. How about that? So, because people so misinterpret Paticca Samuppada to meaning, like, oh no, everything, this the consciousness just stops occurring, or there's annihilation of some kind. And it's just so not the case. All it's doing is bringing an end to the ignoring, because the craving perpetuates the ignoring, and the ignoring perpetuates the craving. So that's craving then. Fine. So yeah, next video I'll talk about feeling, and hopefully that will help really bring out how it is that self-view really warps our understanding of what's actually taking place in our experience. But while I think about it, this relates to a comment I think Peter left on the previous video, about the confusion between what proponents of Advaita Vedanta talk about and what is discussed in Buddha Dhamma, teaching of the Buddha. They appear to some degree to be at odds with one another. For instance, I was on retreat last week and I picked up a book which was about Sri Ramana Mahashri, and I read a quote where this great teacher was saying, the true self is like the thread through a necklace, and all these experiences are like the beads on the necklace, and the true self is the thing that runs through it. And I was thinking, my goodness, that is completely opposite to what the way I put it across, which is there is no thread. And so it is completely understandable that would generate confusion, which is exactly why I teach, don't mix up different spiritual trainings. Don't try to do them both. Anyone who has discovered the true nature of reality can do is describe it. But as I said at the beginning of this video, what we're describing is indescribable. The very act of describing delineates. And the delineation is a denial of the true nature of reality. So it is completely understandable that someone coming from a Vedic or Hindu tradition will talk about the true self, Brahman and Atman and all of that, whereas Buddhism does not, despite what scholars may say, Buddhism is not an outgrowth of Hinduism at all. It's a completely different teaching. It might produce, ultimately, someone may navigate to the same realization of the true nature of reality via either, but never both. Never both. It just brings confusion. It's only the description that brings confusion, not the reality of non-duality or the reality of non-separateness. That never brings confusion. That is the release from confusion. It's just the relative nature of descriptions. So you choose one, you don't choose both. I mean, it's like if I'm standing next to you, I'm on your right-hand side, you're on my left-hand side. If I just stand the other way around, I'm still on your right-hand side, but now you're on my right-hand side. It's just a matter of perspective. But it does produce confusion. And with the greatest respect to Peter, and thank you for making your comments public, if anyone asks me what's wrong with going to a Vedanta satsang on a Tuesday and then practicing Vipassana meditation on a Thursday, I'll just point them to that comment. It just brings confusion because they're two completely separate traditions. So choose. I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong. What resonates with you? And choose that. And let go of the other. And then you won't be confused. Just dismiss it. I mean, when I entered into full-time monastic training under my teacher Alan, and I fully understood that it was Buddha Dhamma, it was Vipassana meditation, I put my love of the words of Krishnamurti to one side. I love Krishnamurti. I think it's brilliant. It helped me so much. But I then entered into the Buddhist training. So I gave my all to examining, investigating, reflecting in terms of the Buddha's teaching. Worked perfectly. I still love Krishnamurti. I still love his words. I still love his way of putting things across. It's really interesting to hear other people's ways of putting things across. The one single area where I disagree with non-path ways of going about things is the idea that there is nothing that you need to do. Only when somebody is absolutely free of all clinging attachment, where the wheel of Paticca Samuppada has come finally, or is at the point where it can finally come to a stop. That's when that particular teaching tool is useful. But before then, people have still got deep emotional attachment to things, whether they're things of the physical world or things of the mental world. And you are, like I said at the beginning, you are not going to just abandon those to the dreadful void. But that it is not a dreadful void. That's the discovery. It is the discovery of fullness, of completeness, of wholeness. That's what it is. And that is, going back to the craving, that is what everyone is searching for through all their actions that leads to the clinging and the becoming and the birth. That is what everyone is looking for. That wholeness, that completeness, that emptiness. See you again soon.